Hey everyone, it's your favorite critic of culture, and today I wanted to tackle the question, what is disability culture or disabled culture? Um, and my first instinct is to say that disabled culture is when I scratch the walls of my house and my mom has to repaint over those walls. That's a disability artifact. um no, and but on a serious note though, what constitute disabled culture is as difficult a question I think as what constitutes culture in general. But typically people say that culture is just the collection of norms, art, ways of being that are common to a specific group of people. Um, and once again, just like with culture in general, that's where you get into the weeds a bit because, like, I would say that the main thing that distinguishes disability culture from other types of culture is our unique culture of accessibility, or um just a culture of access generally, right? Um Mostly facilitated through assistive technology like wheelchairs, canes, um natural language processing algorithms, stuff like that. Um and now that brings up a further question. Most of that stuff that we use isn't really made by us, right? It's made by others for us, typically medical professionals or um you know tech guys, and does it really count as culture then if it's not wrought by our own hands? And to be honest, I sort of go back and forth on this because usually, although not always, right? Um when you're talking about like an artifact that someone in archaeology makes and stuff like that, um it's made by a person that presumably came from that culture. But and it's not to say that disabled people can't make things, but I would say that the biggest part of our culture, which is the assistive tech, probably, right? Like, I think most disabled people would agree. um if it's not made by us, then can we really count it as our culture? And I know some would probably disagree because, it still kind of bears the marks, as I was talking about in my other videos, of a society that, for the most part, still wants to fix us rather than have assistive tech be a part of a holistic solution for accepting the diversity that comes with disability and neurodivergence. But I would still say yes, it is a part of our culture because, you know, it's still used by us. We still interact with it and use it to interact with the world, whatever that may be. Like I said, whether it be canes, wheelchairs, um, even like a space that, let's say, isn't too overly stimulating. Even that I think can be considered. Again, it's the whole culture of, again, access, right? Or when we do make art, it's usually about our unique disabled experiences, although not always, right? Like, you never want to be pigeonholed in some sense because you're still human. But I do think that, not having a firm grip on what exactly disability culture, or having a consciousness of disability culture, is holding us back as a community. Like, I feel like unifying around access, whatever that may look like, could probably help a lot. Um, and to be fair, there are lots of other groups, subgroups, subcultures within disability cultures, particularly the deaf and blind community, that already do this pretty well. Like, they they have their own unique ways of communicating, so I think it makes it easier for um them, right? And I know not every deaf person primarily uses sign language, and not every blind person uses braille, especially with the way assistive tech is now, the way digital screen readers and stuff like that have sort of dominated. But I do feel that language, even when you look at like the era of nation states, the especially the early era of our modern nation states, which, you know come about with Hegel around about 1820 or so, and then find um their like boiling point in 1848, um uh with the revolutions then, and the subsequent like rise of what we today call countries. I do think, just using a historical, or I guess you would call that meta historical example, a historiographical sort of like looking back on that, you realize that language, or any form of communication, right, which is what language is, makes it much easier to do that thing. And that's why I think you definitely see a lot more unity um in the deaf and blind communities. And for me personally, I think they would serve as an excellent example for the rest of the disability community. Although I'd have to be honest, guys, since we haven't really had that much recognition within academics and within life generally, and we're all still struggling, it's sort of hard for me to think of what type of anchoring points, other than the broad concept of, like I said, access, we could use to make that a reality, to help us unify more, right? Because um I do think that eventually that's going to be the only way we we get to the point of being integrated into the wider society. A brief moment of separatism is necessary to really build our own communities first. But that does mean, especially economically, because you can't do that without money, that as one of my subscribers, shout out to Philip Bramwell, said, you do kind of have to um meet those expectations or be integrated into their ways, into the able-bodied and ableist culture, if you want to get anywhere. And yeah, I struggle with that, guys. I really do struggle with that, because like I'd like us to get to a point where, obviously, um yeah, like I'd like our own communities. I'd like us to marry each other and have access centered and disability centered families, that aren't as ableist, or try not to be, at least. And a more clear definition of disability culture would definitely help. And this is just my thoughts and my shot at trying to suss out what that might be. Although, to be honest, I think I'm just like everyone else, where it's such a tricky thing, because we're so diverse. Anyway, see you guys later. Bye.